Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back to the channel. As many of you know, my day job is at Curate Capital, helping to manage just over 100 million of investments for some of the most affluent sharia-compliant investors across the world. Now, one of the most common situations we encounter with our clients is that when someone has just sold a property, they've come into a whole load of cash and they need to know what they want to do about it. One such example came up recently. Let's call him Hafeez. He'd sold a London property and had inherited £750,000 worth of cash. Naturally, he started to think about what he should do with his cash. And in this video, I'll share with you the 3 key things that I told him that he needed to consider before he made any moves with his money. Because if you don't do these 3 things, you're going to make a terrible decision. And then I'll share with you the worst move that one of our other clients, Rafat, let's call him, made from this position as well. And then I will explain what Hafeez ended up doing, which we think was a very good, sensible decision. Let's begin. And of course, folks, as ever, you know this is not financial advice. These videos are made for educational and entertainment purposes only, and your capital is always at risk when you're investing. There are 3 cardinal rules of investing that I laid out for Hafeez before we even got into the discussion about where to deploy his money. These rules are right risk, right liquidity, right time frame. Why is it so important to nail down the right liquidity, risk and time frame? Well, because if you haven't thought about these things, you will end up shopping for investments that are just not relevant for you. It's like having a budget for a £50,000 house and then browsing for a £500,000 house, or planning to go to the USA on holiday but then researching tickets for Namibia. It's just not relevant. So in Hafeez's case, he explained to me that he already owned his home, he had a job, he was making a decent savings as it is from his salary, and this additional £750,000 was just a nice cherry on top. He was 45 and still planning to work for plenty of years, and he doesn't need the £750,000 or the income for at least 7 years or so, because his kids will then be going to university, and that's when he's thinking that he might need to have some money set aside for them. Other than that, he just wants to save generally for his retirement and just be very growth oriented and try and grow this pie as much as possible. And he's happy to take a bit of risk doing that as well. So from this, we gather that Hafeez is happy with moderate to aggressive risk. He doesn't really need any income or ability to exit. And in terms of time frame, he's in it for the long haul with the potential for a partial exit needed after about 7 years or so. And now, folks, let's take that knowledge from Hafeez about his position on these 3 cardinal rules and actually start thinking about how we would apply it. Let's look at a classic investment menu that our clients are faced with. As you can see here, the vertical axis goes all the way from low risk right the way down to the higher risk, more speculative grade stuff. And then the horizontal axis goes from income generating on this end all the way to capital focused on the other end. Without the 3 cardinal rules being clarified, Hafeez would have struggled to find a path through all of this. But now he knows he isn't really interested in income as much, so the left side is not as relevant for him, and he needs to be focusing a lot more on the right hand side of these quadrants. He wants at least to have the ability to do a partial exit in 7 years or less, so going all in on venture capital or private equity is probably not a good idea. So we know, broadly speaking, the kind of things that are in the mix, and I'll share with you exactly what he ended up doing in just a second. But before I do that, let me tell you the cautionary tale of Rafat, another client who did something very, very silly. Rafat also exited a London property, and for simplicity's sake, let's also make this £750,000. Now, Rafat was a high-flying banker in the city. He was making a ton of money, and frankly for him, this £750,000 didn't really register. I know it sounds crazy to you and I, but there are people out there like that. Now, what Rafat did, or more accurately, didn't do, is he just let that money sit there. He was going through an intense period at work and didn't have the time to devote to working out what he was going to do with this money. And as a financial professional, of course, and being a financial professional is its own curse as well, he wanted to do things properly. He wanted to research things and do it himself. And so he ended up just letting it sit there. And the year after, Rafat got married and he still hadn't done anything with it. And then he had a kid, and then he got really busy. And all this while, he just didn't get around to investing this £750,000. And this 750k was also tucked away, by the way, in a different bank account that Rafat rarely looked at. And then eventually, as laptops change and cars change, you lose the longevity details for this as well. 10 years later, with the ravages of time and all of the zakat he had to pay on it every single year, Rafat still had not invested his £750,000, and now it was actually worth a shocking £336,000. His money had become less than half with what he even started with. Now, Rafat's main blunder was, of course, he did nothing, but he also made two other smaller blunders. The first smaller blunder is that whilst you're waiting to make a decision, just park your money somewhere. It might be a low-risk savings account type product like Curate Cash, or it might be in our income fund where it's locked away and accessible within 3 months notice. But whilst it's there, it's earning 7.5%. Because in 9 cases out of 10, you think you'll sort it all out in 2 months, but don't be surprised if you still haven't quite done it after 2 years. Life happens. The second small blunder Rafat made was he parked that money somewhere hard to access and liable to be overlooked. Don't do that because you'll forget about it. Anyway, we got Rafat sorted, but that's a story for another day. Now, back to Hafeez. So Hafeez realized that he needed to basically build a diversified portfolio focused towards capital growth, but with elements of the portfolio in things where he could exit out of relatively easily when he needed to. So let's take a look at that graph again. Stated another way, the options he was looking at were the following. So what Hafeez ended up doing was he put 750,000 across a whole range of these investments. He put 250,000 into the Rasmala real estate fund because he liked the fact that it was capital growth. He liked the fact that it had security, that he could get out of it relatively quickly as well if he wanted to, and the fact that it was going to make him a decent enough return over the long term. He also really liked the community healthcare fund for very similar reasons because, again, it's a real estate fund. He also then put a smaller amount, 100k, into the income fund on the basis that this is giving him a slightly lower risk return, but it's also going to compound away over time, and also crucially, there's liquidity there that he can call on as well. And then for the more aggressive end of the spectrum, he set aside about £200,000 for that. He put 150,000 into the private equity strategy, investing into pharmacies, and then he put 50,000 into the venture capital fund, which is also giving him some tax efficiencies and tax rebates as well. So effectively, what he had built out there was a core of his portfolio he was investing in nicely appreciating, low risk, relatively real estate heavy investments, and then a chunk of his portfolio he had in more higher growth investments as well. But even there, he had tilted it a little bit more towards the more moderate to aggressive end of the spectrum. So rather than going for lots of early stage technology companies, which is what venture capital is, he leaned it a little bit more towards pharmacy, which is much more of a known commodity. Over 10 years, while Rafat ended up halving his money, Hafeez can achieve this. On a blended basis, we are modeling out a 12% return, which should be very achievable given the kind of investments he's making, and that gives him a stonking 2.47 million over that period. Now, assuming for some reason we want to be a little bit more cautious about how we are modeling things and say 9% per annum return instead, even here, Hafeez ends up with a very respectable 1.83 million pounds. Compare that to Rafat now, who with the same amount of money to start with, he ended up with 336k. And even for Rafat, 2.5 million is definitely something that he is going to be focused on. And he gave that up because he didn't focus on what he needed to do, and he just let this go into the long grass. So folks, remember, before you invest, answer the 3 cardinal rules. But don't just leave it in a bank account whilst you are answering the 3 cardinal rules. Leave it somewhere that's going to make a little bit of a return where you can get it out relatively quickly. Now, if you want to learn about these rules and other key considerations that you should think about with your investment plan, and also get a template of what your investment plan should look like, then you should check out this book, Halal Investing for Beginners, that we published last year. You can grab it on Amazon and the link is in the description below. Once you've got the answers to the 3 cardinal rules, you then move on to the fun bit of actually allocating your money across the different investments. Try to be balanced, mix and match across asset classes, liquidities and risk, and you should end up with a fairly robust, diversified, long-term portfolio that actually achieves the goals that you have in your life. If you've benefited, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends and family who might be sat on some cash and needed this guidance. And if you would like us to be making more videos like this, then let us know in the comments below, and also try and grow this channel as much as possible, because that gives us the feedback to continue. And let me know in the comments below what you make of the investments that Hafeez made as well. What would you have done differently? Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.